Good morning. Thanks for joining us at the IEEE Women in Engineering International Leadership Conference. Glad you're all here. So many registered. I'm so thrilled to be here virtually with you. My name is Elizabeth Lyons, and I'm here to kick off this presentation, and after me there'll be some other speakers as well, so definitely stay tuned. Glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about moving into leadership, and it's a kind of conversation that a lot of women ask me. How do I get that promotion? When do I ask for the raise? When's the best time to do that? Do you really think I could make more money? So all of those sorts of things are going to be answered today in this presentation. The presentation has been given a few times through the IEEE and also globally with other organizations. I think you're going to get a lot out of it, and welcome. I'm glad that you're here. So the first thing I just want to touch base with you about is just my background, and I've just had the privilege of working with the IEEE for probably 14 years now, and I come to the table with a little bit of a unique perspective. I'm the author of a couple of books. The first one was called Recession Proof Yourself, and it was launched in 2009 when we had the largest recession in our country. It was written for the people that lost their jobs during that time. The second book I launched in 2012, and it was called I Quit, Working for You Isn't Working for Me. And I'm in the middle of launching my third book for women in leadership, which I hope you'll enjoy. I do have a private practice, career counseling, and I also have a private practice where I work with women in leadership. What I found is women have very unique sorts of questions and issues in leadership versus the men that I work with in my coaching practice. And so I have something very special just for them to offer. A lot of my content can be found on the IEEE, and I also have a radio show called Leadership Lessons from the Lioness through Plaid for Women. Not only do I teach leadership development and work with leaders, either senior leaders or women that want to get into leadership or in career transition, but I've also led a team of men myself. I've actually been in a leadership position, and I think that makes me a little bit unique. So I'm not just spouting off ideas or things that I've seen or heard that works. I've actually had to be that female leader, and it was tough. And there were some days where I just didn't know if I was going to make it, and I really felt like I was over my head. And we'll talk a little bit about that today and how I got around those sorts of issues. So what we're going to talk about today specifically is the difference between leadership and manager. What's the difference? What's a manager? What's a leader? Are they all the same thing? We'll talk about the real decision about moving from an individual contributor role into a leadership role. You could actually be a very strong individual contributor and be a leader and not have a team of direct reports. And that's okay. Maybe you take the promotion and maybe you don't. But I really want to talk about what's driving you to want a leadership position, because I think that's the most important piece. We'll talk about teamwork and understanding how your performance is measured very differently once you move from the individual contributor into a leader. The toughest thing that technical professionals have to face is once they stop being that strong individual contributor and move into leadership, often they fail. There isn't leadership programs available to develop them, and they have a very hard time letting go of their old job and moving into a leadership position. And we'll talk about how you're measured differently and how it's important to let go of your old position. We'll talk a little bit about designing your leadership style, and we'll also identify the key factors of what you need, the traits that you need to be successful to move into leadership. So, what is leadership? And I remember when I wrote this presentation, I remember wanting to really articulate what was leadership and realizing that it was hard to define what it was, and then the best way that I could figure out what it was to look at maybe what it's not. And quickly, I found that leadership had nothing to do with holding a manager, director, or vice president title. Nothing at all. Think about that. Have you ever reported to somebody that wasn't a strong leader that held a big title? I think we all have in our career. And it's difficult for us to respect them as a leader or to take direction from them because they just don't have leadership presence. They don't have follow through. There's some things that really identify the hallmark of a true leader, particularly with a woman. And that was the first thing I identified. Leadership is not just having the title. You could have gotten the title and the money and not been effective at all. Leadership is not management. Managers manage process, procedures, rules, policies. They're managing that. A leader is somebody that has the ability and the wherewithal and the emotional intelligence and the charisma, frankly, to lead people, to understand when people aren't following directions, to understand what it takes to tap the maximum talent out of them and pull that out of that individual. So one could actually be a manager and not be a leader at all. And if you look at the books, about 15 years ago, they stopped using the word manager in some of the self-help business books, and they started using the title leader. So years and years and years ago, there were books that were like the 1-minute manager, and it was all about managing your team and controlling your team and forcing them to do things, and it was all about that. And there was a big shift that happened after that. They realized that people were not responding to very forced leadership tactics, that people actually responded to being collaborative, to being treated in a different manner. And that's when we started to really define what is leadership and look at leaders to understand what it really takes to be that leader. Again, I think the female leader is very different, and my third book really addresses that, and a lot of the articles that I'm putting out through the IEEE will give you an idea about what it takes to be a powerful female leader. So I found some interesting quotes while I was doing the research for this presentation, and I wanted to share them with you. So Peter Drucker actually said, when asked what is leader, he said, the only definition of leader is someone who has followers. Well, I don't really know about that. I mean, the Kardashians have a lot of followers. I don't necessarily know that I would call them great leaders. Warren Bennis said, leadership is the capacity to translate a vision into reality. I would agree with that. I would agree with that you need to have a vision and you need to move people towards that vision. Bill Gates had a great quote around this. He said, as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those that empower others. And I would agree with that. Think about that in your own career. Think about who you've reported to the last 2, 3, 4 years. Did they empower you? Did they push you and motivate you to do a little bit more or a little bit better? Did they inspire you? That's really, when we start to talk about leadership, that's what we're really getting into. And then John Maxwell said, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. I think that quote's okay to a point because, when are we talking about influence and when are we talking about manipulation? And if we start to get into manipulation, I don't think then all of a sudden we have effective leadership. I think by that point, then it's becoming distorted. I think that leadership and having influence is good, but I think it's important to be able to pull the talent out of them and to motivate them. So here's what I came up with. Leadership is having a vision, setting a tone, and creating an environment for that team to collaborate, work, and move as one unit. And that was the hardest thing that I ever had to do as a leader myself. Creating the environment is critical, and I think that women in leadership do this great. I think they actually do it better than their male counterparts. You've got to create the environment so that if the team makes a mistake, it's okay, that they're allowed to bring any and all ideas to the table, whether in a meeting or privately to you. Creating that environment is important. Setting the tone with what you're going to put up with and what you're not, what's expected of your team is important as well, particularly as a woman. That tone has to be set, and those sorts of rules and all the said and unsaid things has to be done in about the first 60 days, or as a female leader, you'll lose traction very quickly. So it's important to get into these leadership positions, set that tone, set the boundaries with the team, and move forward, particularly if you're in IT, because chances are you're going to end up like me, and you're going to end up with a team that has a lot of men on it. And then allowing them to collaborate and understanding that you don't always have to have the rules. You could actually let them have the rules, have them have the ideas, and orchestrate it to move together into the project. So what I found, and I have also talked and worked with a lot of leaders, the most powerful leaders that I've met, they really understood that people needed to feel significant. And you would be amazed how many people get up and go to work but don't understand how their job ties into this bigger picture and ultimately ties into the stock market. They have no idea, and they're very far removed for that. And that if you start to explain to them why their job is important and how what they bring to the position is very important, that everything touches everything, they begin to feel significant. All of a sudden they're contributing more, and they have some pride, and they have some ownership in it. The other thing that I noticed is leadership is a place where learning and competence matter. So you're supporting your team for continuing education, and you're also paying attention to what do they want to learn. You know, if they're doing a good job, where else do their interests lie? Asking those kinds of questions of them on an ongoing basis is important. Leadership is a place where work is exciting. And in IT and engineering, it's very easy to do that. We have new technologies, we have new projects, we have new products that get launched. And if we can keep the work exciting and stimulating, what you'll find is the leadership position is actually fun, and people are engaged and they're giving their very best. The other thing that to me is very important in leadership is that every team member is unique, but no one is exclusive. So when I ran a team, I had an A player. I mean, he was really great, and I used to call him my Peyton Manning. There wasn't anything I couldn't give to him that wasn't done perfectly and on time. I didn't have to follow up with him. It was just done, and I really enjoyed working with him. And then I had other team members that had other strengths as well, but he really stood out. And I remember coming home from work one day and worrying that the other people in the team would think that I favored him because I gave him special assignments or special things to do. And what I found was they didn't notice it at all, because I made a real point of making sure that everybody knew that they had value on the team. So he might be my Peyton Manning, but you can't have a team full of Peyton Mannings. You need people that are going to block. You need people that are going to, run. You need other positions on a football team. And everybody knew he was Peyton Manning, and that was fine, because I made sure the others knew what their special talent was. So, for example, I had one gentleman that was really good at research. And so when I had things that were very difficult, he was the best at research, and I would hand him those sorts of assignments. I had another one that had great relationship building skills, so I would have him, work with people internally or work with some of the vendors externally. So it's really relaying the message as a leader that the entire team has value. You're going to have your A player, but you don't want to exclude that person out and have the others feel like they don't have value on the team. And that the entire vision is valued. That's the other piece that's important. You've got to have a vision. You can't just walk in, put in process, put in procedures, put in policies and think, 6, 12 months later, okay, great, my job is done. You got to have a vision for the team. Where are you going? Why is that important? Do they buy into that? Because if they don't, you're going to find that they're not going to produce. What I found as a leader, and when I look at a lot of leaders, particularly female leaders, what they say is critical. It's critical to them gaining respect. It's critical to people following through and doing what they need to do or responding to a directive. What you say as a female leader can also crucify you. If it's not said right, if it's not said perfectly, if it's said the wrong place at the wrong time, it could really hurt your career. So I did a lot of thinking around what was I saying, how was I saying it, why was I saying it. And I learned actually how to speak a lot less, particularly in meetings, and to really watch what was going on in the room. And that helped me in my career as well. So when we talk about conversation, or we're talking about, let's say it's a staff meeting that you're running, any kind of conversation that is about we or the team, any conversation, any statement that you make that fosters unity is going to go a long way and is really going to help propel you as a leader. You want to think of them as a part of a team, and that you're a part of that team as well. That you're measured on their deliverables, and that's what's going to separate you out from an individual contributor ultimately. You want to think about taking average workers, your steady eddies, the person that comes in at 8 o'clock and leaves at 5. They do great work, there's no doubt about it, but the end of the day, they're out the door, and they definitely take all their PTO and vacation. You want to take those average workers and see if you can't inspire them. See if you can't challenge them. See if you can't give them special assignments that's really going to spark some interest. Ask them, what are they interested in? What do they like about their job? What do they not like about their job? You want to be motivational to some extent. And I know that that's a personality trait that not everyone has. But you can find and develop your own style to be motivational, to know when you're really connecting with the team member, to look in their eyes and know when you're reaching them and when you're being motivational. I think as a female leader too, it's really important to know when are you going to listen and even console on a bad day, and when, frankly, you just need to kick them in the butt and tell them to go back to their desk and do some work. And I think it's a delicate balance with female leaders. When do you do that? How do you do that? When are you motivating, and when are you're not helping them at all because now your door is just, people come in and just dump problems. And again, you want to create that environment so that they learn and they grow and they have permission to screw up. That it doesn't necessarily mean somebody's job if they make a mistake. And the mistakes aren't hidden under the rug, that they trust you enough to come to you and say, hey, I think I really blew it here. I just want to bring this to your attention. You want to be trustworthy. You can influence others by your character, by being humble. I don't think there's anything more beautiful than a humble leader, and by your example. So, I had to think about that too. I mean, would I give my team assignments that I wouldn't do? No. So I would make sure that if they wouldn't do it, that I would be right there in the trenches, doing it as well, or helping them or what have you. I didn't just bark an order and walk out the door. It's recognizable when others follow you. You'll know it. You'll know it as you grow into it, and it won't happen overnight. It's something that happens by really developing yourself as much as it is developing the team. So here's the big question. Moving into leadership, why do you want to do this? There's nothing wrong with staying a solid individual contributor and, learning more skills and going from there and knowing your place in the organization. I think the biggest mistake is when people move into leadership and they don't know why, and they're identified, or they go after it in this aggressive manner and they get it, and then they're not happy with it because you're measured differently. So before you start to look for promotion, I ask of you to really ask yourself, why do you want this? I mean, is it pay? Is it title? Is it prestige and power? I mean, that's okay too, but I would take the time to recognize that. Is it that you think you can do it better? I think we've all been there. You've had a bad boss prior and you think, oh my gosh, I could do their job. It's not that hard. And so then you go after the promotion, and really look at what are the trade-offs of being a leader rather than an individual contributor. And what are the things that aren't as fun? I mean, what I found was now I had to worry about 6 people. I didn't have to worry about just myself. And I had to walk into some pretty intense meetings once a week with the owner of nearly $1 billion company and explain why my team was doing something or not doing something. And I didn't like that after a while. I got very tired of doing that. And you can't have excuses. Ultimately, it's your leadership. You're either getting them there or you're not. So that's kind of the trade-off of being a leader. Do you want to do that? Do you want to be bogged down in process, procedures, and rules and meetings explaining what you're doing and giving updates, or do you want to be doing the work? It's vastly different. In IT, what you'll find also is sometimes what they'll have is working managers. Working managers, very tough. I mean, now you're responsible for leading a team and you're also doing some coding, or you're also doing code reviews, or what have you. And that it's like 2 jobs rolled into one with just one salary, but it's really two jobs. So that's worth looking at too. Do you want to be a working manager, or do you just want to go into oversight, and why? There's a chasm that gets crossed from the IT or the engineer person, if you will, male or female, that goes from being a technical individual and moves into leadership. And there's a tremendous amount that don't make it. And I've met some of those individuals, and they'll actually take $20,000 less in their salary to go back to be an individual contributor. And this slide will tell you exactly why they failed, and failed miserably. Unable to let go of their prior job is probably the biggest reason why people fail, particularly in IT and engineering. They can't delegate, they won't delegate, they don't trust anybody to do it and do it as well, so they just work longer hours. But ultimately, they fail just due to their mindset, and they lack this we, us, team leadership mentality, and they're more individual. So they, will be a little bit more self-centered, and they don't really value the team. And again, I think that if you look back in your own career, you may have reported to somebody like this, or somebody that stole your idea, or somebody that you shared with them an idea that you had, and then the next thing you know, they're in a staff meeting and they've claimed the idea. They take the credit. They don't look at the team as a whole and that they're a part of it. They look at it as something different, and often that's why what you'll find is the leader fails. So, the big question is, what do you need in terms of skills to go from individual contributor to leader? I had a young woman call me a couple weeks ago. She was probably maybe 2 years out of an internship. She had a great education. She was doing a fantastic job where she was at, but she was looking for another position in another state. She was very young, and she said to me, I would like to be a senior IT project manager. And the first thing I said was, well, you're going to have a hard time with that, because those are usually people with 10 to 15 years experience, and you have 2. And she had a hard time understanding why she couldn't automatically be a senior IT project manager. So there are skills that you learn over time. And we'll talk about compensation later, but compensation is based off of part of your skill and part of your time in the saddle. How long have you been doing it? And that's what equates to your compensation. So these are actually some traits and also some hardcore skills that you'll have to learn either on the job, on the fly, which is very stressful, or prior, and kind of prep yourself prior to going into a leadership position. So any kind of organizational skills, any kind of balancing headcount to budget, any kind of accounting or budgeting skills would be really helpful. You have to have strategic thinking in order to be effective and to hit the deadlines and to keep the team going the right direction. Weekly status reports. Again, something as simple as learning Excel and learning pivot tables or VLOOKUPs. That might be very helpful as you move into a leadership position. The biggest thing, I think, and the hardest thing is understanding what your new boss expects of you as the new leader. And it's hard. It's hard to really know what that is. And for me personally, I'm not good at guessing things and or thinking I know, and I've made some blunders in my own career by thinking I knew what the target was and delivering to that, and then finding out later that was not the target. I personally find it's better just to flat out ask them. So ask your new boss questions like, when we talk on a one-on-one, how do you want the information delivered? Do you like it in email? Do you like me to talk you through it? Do you like a high-level sort of conversation? I mean, how do you want this information? You got to report up on the team. What's the format? That's really the question. What's the format that you want it in? Understanding that you're going to respond to management pressures. You got to respond to them and you can't react. And that's a big thing that female leaders need to learn, is controlling their emotions and how are they going to respond to something and not react. The other thing that you need to make that transition into leadership is the idea that you're a reflection of your boss. Absolutely. you're also a reflection of your team. And once you understand what you do affects everything and everyone, that's when you start to see you're crossing the chasm into real leadership. And then the ability to develop others, that's important as well. So how are you going to do that, right? Are you going to, is it canned training? Are you going to do it? Are you going to cross-train your team? I mean, these are all things to think about as you move into these leadership positions. So what do you really need? What are the core traits that you need to be a solid leader? Vision's one of them. You got to trust your team. You've got to have really good listening skills, particularly as a woman in leadership. You've got to really pay attention not to what they said, but all the stuff they didn't say, because that's where it really goes on. You have to have honesty, transparency, sometimes confidentiality. People are people, and they will bring problems into work. They will bring things into work, and how are you going to deal with that? You're going to want to have very simple and clear communication. As a female leader, particularly if you lead men, less words are better. Very important. The less you speak, the more powerful it is. And then doing what you say you're going to do. So if somebody comes to you and has a question about their pay, you know, when am I going to receive the increase, for example, and you say, well, let me call accounting and get back to you. You get back to them in a timely manner. You tell them in a couple days. Those sorts of things build respect and foster trust within your own team. So it's not easy because you've got to, you know, have the vision, set the tone, get the environment in a place that's collaborative, and then move them forward. So it's not going to be easy, but the key elements are visioning, knowing, you know, where you're taking them and why you're taking them and reminding them of that. Expectations, setting the tone, what you're going to put up with, what you're not. Having rules that create boundaries, but you still are fostering creativity because it's an engineering team, chances are. It's an IT team, so you want that kind of creativity. You want to be an inspirational leader. You want to listen. You want to be positive, particularly if it's a bad day. And believe me, there's going to be bad days. And you're going to want to be the bright light in some of those situations. And particularly as a female leader, never want to let them see you sweat. Never. So if you go into a meeting and you just got chewed out for something that was done or not done and you don't feel good about it, when you come out of that door and you face your team, it's like it never happened. You're going to take that on and you're not going to have that bleed all over everything. So I want to pause a minute. I've been talking quite a while here. What was the best boss you ever had? And I just want to take a minute, type it in the chat box. What was it about them that made them just a fantastic boss? It doesn't matter what job. It could have been years ago or your current job. Best boss you ever had. What was he or she like? And just type it in the chat box. Fair, friendly, understanding, flexible. Oh, I love that, Allie. Treated me as a peer even when I needed coaching, patience, listening, nudging. Oh, thanks, Christina. They always followed through. Yep. Stood up for her team. I love it. Protected us from politics so we could work. That's who you want to be as a female leader. Absolutely. Taught me how to order priorities. Beautiful. Beautiful. So before we roll into designing your style, those bosses that you had, male or female, that you just commented on, do you think you can be her? That's what I did. When I first started in leadership, I thought to myself, the best bosses I ever had. And I thought, what was it about them and what could I emulate about them? Could I be that? Could I be patient? Could I fight for them? And I was known as quite the fighter. I really fought for my team, and they knew it. I also think it's important that the team knows when you fight for them and that what your expectations are. These are the things that are going to make you very powerful leaders as women. So designing your style, think about that. Who do you want to be? Strategize on who you want to be as a leader. Look even out into the press, or who do you like? The women leaders in IT, who do you like? Who do you want to emulate? I have my own, and I look at them and I really want to emulate who they are when they're asked the tough questions, when they respond rather than react. Who are they? How did they do it? What did they say? How did they say it? That's what you want to think about. Think about the worst boss you ever had, and I want to take a minute and talk about that. The worst boss you ever had. What was it about them that was just so difficult to work with them? Please type it in the chat box. Never supported me in front of others. Yep. Sometimes they steal your ideas, which is always shocking. What else? Worst boss. Political animal, only interested in promoting their own career. I think that's important to look at. Because if you're driven, you go into leadership. And if you go into management, then you want to be the director. And then if you're the director, you might want to be the VP. So how do you continue your own path and not tear up everybody in the process? That's fair to look at before you go into leadership. How would you do it different? Anything else? Worst boss you ever had? The one that you would go to bed at night and think about the day and, just play that day over and over again in your mind and be really upset about. Openly trash an employee for an honest mistake. Yep. So you don't have to be those things. You don't ever have to be those things. And it's worth looking at and thinking about now before you get that promotion. Or if you are in a leadership position, it's great to refine your leadership style. I work with very seasoned leaders as well. I don't just work with new leaders. I work with very seasoned leaders that want to pull more out of their team. They got to look at themselves and their behavior. So designing your style. So I want to leave you with this. This is me. This isn't going to work for all of you, right? So understand also I'm about 5 feet tall, right? So when I walk into a room, I'm like, okay, I'm going to project authority here, right? I'm very direct. I'm very open. I'm very honest. I'm from the East Coast originally. I was born an hour outside of New York City, so I speak fast. I have a different kind of style to myself, and I had to lead a team of men, okay? So I knew what I was up against when I walked into the room. So the first thing I had to learn was, how do I give a directive? As a female leader, how do I tell them to do something? You don't think about this until you're the leader and you're like, oh, I need them to do things. What do I say? How do I say it and not come off like this mean, horrible, we all know where I'm going with this, right? So how do you do it and still be respected? So I use the same language over and over and over again. And this on this slide is exactly what I used for a team of all men. So when I had to make a request of them, a directive, I did it very concisely. And there was degrees of the sense of urgency and what I wanted from them. So I would, if it wasn't very urgent, I would start with please. And I would say, please give me this report. I need it by the end of today. Please is professional courtesy, right? But it was also very clear, this needs to be done and here's the timeline. If I just came out of a meeting where I just got beat up for what they did or didn't do, I came out of that meeting and I would go to the team, or I would go to one individual and I would say, please, blah, 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 do it. And do it means do it. And if there was a bigger sense of urgency, I would say, do it now. And do it now meant you better go back to your desk, you better not check email, you better not be doing anything but that, and by the time I get back down to my office, it better be in my inbox. And then if I said do it now, I explained why later, because I always gave my team the big picture. Do this report because I need to show it to so-and-so. Do this whatever because I need to report this up by next Tuesday. I would tell them why it was important, but I had degrees in this, and men responded to this. They responded to please, they responded to do it, and they responded to do it now. Now, again, that's my personality. It worked very well for me, and I also would never use this sort of communication style if I had a woman on my team. It would have been very different. So I think that's a little key when we talk about designing our style. What are you going to say, and how are you going to say it? It's worth thinking about. The biggest thing I can say is, unless you have a remote team, and even if you have an individual that is remote, don't lead an email. I mean, have you ever had that happen where you get an email and it hits your desk and you're like, oh, what does that mean? You know, and you get like, oh my gosh, I might lose my job, you know, and I've had that. And then I walk in the other room, the person that just sent me the email, and I'll say, hey, I got your email. And they're like, oh yeah, it's fine. I'll just, just hand it to me next Thursday. And I think, whoa, that's not what I just read. But I can't tell. Did I read it too strong? And maybe it wasn't, or was that meant to zing me? I don't know. And you don't ever want your direct reports to think that of you. You don't ever want them to be fearful of you. The moment they're fearful of you, they don't trust you. The moment they don't trust you, they're not going to produce. It's very simple. So we're going to roll very quickly into types of styles. And I'm going to take all questions at the end. I know this is a lot of information, but I'll take any questions at the end. So there's 3 basic kinds of leadership styles. And if you listen to this presentation and walk away from it, you'll remember leaders that use some of these styles. So the 3 we're going to cover today is command and control, situational, and transformational. And we're going to talk about how you use them, when you use them, and what are the pitfalls of some of those styles. So command and control is basically, when I said a few minutes ago, do it now, that's command and control. That is meant to build urgency. That is meant to get people to do things right away. It's actually used in the military, because the joke in the military is, you can't have people asking why. You just need them to respond, because if you're in a time of warfare, you need them to respond and react. The problem with a lot of command and control is it's ineffective and people turn off. So I think it should be used. I really think it should be used as a female leader, but sparingly, because ultimately it can squash creativity and it can also promote a lot of fear. Situation leadership is my favorite. I've taught classes on this. I've personally used it. I'm a huge fan of it because it works for everybody in any situation. On Friday afternoons, I used to close my door and open up the situational leadership book and look at it, and there's a chart there, and you can literally see where your team member is and then how you should respond to them. So it goes through, as a leader in this situation with this team member, should you be directive, supportive, empowering, or coaching them? There are 4 different paths there. It's fantastic if you take a leadership position and they're not your team. You didn't build the team, you inherited them. It's great for that. It's great if you have a lot of change going on in your organization. It's great if you're a senior leader or a brand new leader. I highly recommend that book, Situational Leadership. And then transformational, have you heard of that style? It's a little bit of a buzzword in IT. You will see CTOs using that kind of language. They'll say things like, I'm a transformational leader. I did a recruitment about 2 years ago, and I was looking for a CTO, and there was like 200 people applied, and about 10 of the resumes that I selected, of the 10, 5 of them at the top said, I'm a transformational leader. So you're going to start to see more of this in articles and in the press. It's a little murky. I like the idea of it, but it's a little hard to nail down what it really is. But ultimately, it really counts on everybody giving their best, and it expects the team to transform even when it's uncomfortable. The pitfall is, you could end up just being a cheerleader and motivational, but your team isn't actually hitting the deliverables. So you really have to understand what transformational leader is and to be able to know what to do when to be an effective transformational leader. It's a lot of motivation, it's a lot of team strengthening, it's a lot of optimism, but sometimes you need to deliver hard feedback, right? And in transformational leadership, there's not a lot of discussion around that. You're really counting on the team to deliver. You will pitch in if it gets difficult. Again, it's difficult to really nail down what is it, and I think it's even harder to identify when a leader actually pulls it off. So we're starting to wrap up here a little bit, and I'm happy to take questions in the chat box for the next few minutes, but I really want to leave you with this. So if you're going to go into leadership, why? Why do you want to do it? And when you get there, who do you want to be? So remember, we talked about your worst boss and your best boss. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about your style. And know that, your style will change the first 90 days. But to really know who do you want to be in relationship to leadership before you get there is important. What you'll find is very few organizations have any leadership development training at all. You're going to have to go to classes, pick up books, and learn your job, and learn the team, and hit all your deliverables. It's a lot. So if you want to go into leadership or you're even remotely interested, it's always good to prepare before. And to just decide if you want to do it at all. There's nothing wrong with staying a very solid individual contributor. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can still build a very nice career path, you can still build good skills, and you can still make more money. So I want to leave you with those things. Why do you want to do it? Why do you really want to do it? What's driving you to want to go into leadership? And how can you make a difference if you take that leap into leadership? Thank you for your time this morning. I'm so, thrilled to be able to kick this off with this kind of a topic. I'd love to hear from you individually if you'd like. You're more than welcome to visit my website. I've just got some new videos up there. More than welcome. It's elizabethlyons.com. I have a couple of books there, and I am a specialist in leadership development and career management. So if there's something that you don't want to ask me here in the webinar, you're welcome to come to me privately. You're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, but please say that you saw me here at the Women in Engineering International Leadership Conference. Okay, I'm going to take a pause and see if there's any questions from the audience. I had one question about the overall job market. How's the job market doing around the country? What can we expect? The job market right now in this year is very robust. We're predicting it to be robust the next couple of years. I've done hiring now for 15 years. I've seen 2 recessions. I don't see recession coming in the next year or so. I spoke with my own financial planner. She's seeing it about 5 years. So recession would hit again. It's a natural thing that happens. But now is a good time to look for a new job if you're looking. It's a good time to look for a promotion if that's what you want. Across the country. I would say there's pockets that are stronger than others. Silicon Valley in California is strong. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania Connecticut is strong. Texas is strong markets for job, particularly in IT and engineering. Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas, great markets for jobs. Leadership positions are definitely on the rise. I would just be prepared when you take them so that you're ready and that you can go in and be effective quickly. And I'll give it another pause. Any other questions, feel free just to type them in the chat box. The last thing I would add to that too is if you're going to take a leadership position, understand what it pays so that you ask for a fair salary. Sometimes women don't know what the position pays and they won't know what to ask for, and you should expect a sizable jump if you're going to move into leadership from an individual contributor position. Are there specific classes you're recommended starting with? That's a good question, Enid. So, I think start with your interests. I mean, if you're interested in building your style, look at style books. I highly recommend the Situational Leadership book. I highly recommend it. I taught that class even on the IEEE. Anything around that would be helpful. And then think about what do you want to learn in terms of leadership? Do you need to know business acumen? Then we're talking, you might need to take a little Excel class. Think about where you think you're light and go from there. But I would definitely look into the soft skills around the leadership piece as well. It's also helpful if you're leading a discipline that you came out of. So let's say that you want to go off and being engineering manager. If you have a development background and you're leading developers, it's easier. That I can tell you. And actually, they will trust you and respect you quicker than somebody that doesn't have that background. Great question. I'm going to give it about another 20-30 seconds. All right, well, I don't see any other questions, so thank you for joining us this morning at the IEEE Women in Engineering International Leadership Conference. Great speakers to follow this presentation. Thank you for being here.